afternoon or evening, depending on when you're tuning into your course. This is our first session where we're going to delve into the sutra, or sutras as they are. But as I said in the introductory video, we will first start with the invocation for the Guru. So I invite you to lower your gaze or close your eyes completely. Then take your attention to your breath, or whatever way serves you best, and coming present to yourself in this moment. Om Shri Guru Pyo Namah. We imagine our teachers and our teachers' teachers. And then we acknowledge the teacher that is growing within ourselves. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes or lifting your gaze. So I thought I would share a quote from a more recent teacher of mine. Most of my studies, bigger studies, were done in India with various teachers, swamis, on ashrams. But I did do some stateside training not too long ago with Janet Stone, and I just got her newsletter in today, and I loved this quote, the way in which she described the process of yoga. And she said, "Yoga is a process by which we clear and open the aperture of our lens to see ourselves and the world around us more clearly." So you could consider that in whatever way makes sense for you. So today we crack the book, we open the sutras, and we start on the path of jnana mārga. So this is the part of the course that is focused more on the knowledge or the wisdom aspect. It's more mind-centered than anything, though that wisdom definitely lives throughout. Some consider this mārga the most difficult to accomplish. I think it just depends on the individual where they tend to put their strengths. The mind is used to inspire and inquire into our true nature and to transcend identification and thoughts and identity with ego. And so some of the teachings in the sutras are guided toward those specifically for us. The very first sutra, as you can see here, excuse me, speaks to us, well, maybe you can't see, but you can see the slide, speaks to us of intention. So again, I invite you to lower your gaze or close your eyes completely. And then drop into the softest place inside yourself that you can find. And from there, see if anything, it may happen now, may happen later, may happen much later. See if you can feel or sense an intention for stepping into this practice right now for you. You would pause the video if you need more time. You may pause the video to scribble down that intention or record it in some other way so you can kind of reflect back on it throughout your practice or at the end. But this is basically what the first sutra says. It asks us to create that intention. And then the second sutra, Yoga Citta Vritti Nirodha, basically says, now we begin the practice of yoga. So yoga, the first word, is the process of attaining union and a harmonious state of mind, as we talked about before. Citta refers to consciousness and the place in which we deposit our thoughts and feelings. Talks more about that in the Sutra 115. Vritti are the turnings and thought constructs, and we're going to talk more on that in a moment. And Nirodha, which comes from ni, which means completely or in every respect, and rodha, which is disciplining and not allowing to roam aimlessly. So this is where we start to see a little bit of the dualism that Patanjali had, and a little bit of strictness he had in pointing us in our practices. This is a very different perspective than some other practices, such as, say, Tantra, where there is less feeling of rigidity and more towards a different kind of guidance in practices. So that is basically what this one is. He is saying, now I begin to teach. Now I begin to share the practice of yoga. And there are the three things that he speaks of in this second sutra. Then he goes to describe kind of the ultimate aim, and that's in Sutra 23 of the first pada, samadhi. And this is another term for that union. I know it's confusing. And it has different names in different places. So, for example, in Buddhism, it is referred to as nirvana. In some forms of yoga, or yogic sages' practices, they call it moksha, or liberation. It's that time of when life usually ends because there's complete liberation. In the Vedanta tradition of jnana, it also could be referred to as Atman, and that's when the merging of what some call little self and big self become one. And we'll talk more about little self and big self in another session. So it is the time when you hit samadhi, it's a time when all ignorance or avidya is removed, or avidya vritti. And it's a union with something called Ishvara Pranidhana. So there's those words I just shared with you were words that describe the attainment of. And this speaks in Sutra 29, speaks more specifically to what it is the unification is with. So let me just read you a quote here from the Grimes Sanskrit dictionary that I showed you last time. He says, Ishvara Pranidhana refers to the cultivation of a spirit of absolute self-surrender to Ishvara, or God. So now I know some people that is not a term they use. It's not a term that they identify with. So what I want you to do is pause the video, excuse me for a minute, and I want you to identify what is it that you consider that does represent a state of union with that which is all being. What would you call that? So when I say Ishvara or God or whatever the term is, excuse me, you will place into that instead what the reality is for you and what your faith is in. So take a moment to do that. And so once you've completed writing that thought about liberation, another word that's used is kaivalya, and with Ishvara Pranidhana, he turns away from the ultimate goal and he starts to speak to the, he meaning Patanjali, begins to speak to the things which cause us or come in the way of being able to go to that place. So these are things that we deal with every single day. They just have special Sanskrit terms. So one of those terms, as you can see here, is called klesha. And there are multiple different kinds of klesha. I'm not going to get into all of those right now. You can read a bit about them in your translations. Also, if you take the immersion teacher training, there we will do more discussion around them. But you can think of them as ignorance or ways in which we mistaken our self-identification or the attachments we have or the aversions and fears or the ways in which affliction and non-affliction happens. That's kind of a what I want to say, English translation of the main kleshas. But basically, all of them create a chatter in the chitta, the mind. They create a chatter in the chitta. And they create distractions, and they create avidya. They create ignorance. Avidya is ignorance. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to show us what these are, kind of like when I work with coaching clients, and we're trying to find the thing that's keeping them from where they want to go. We try to name them and be aware of them so we can, work with them. And so it's the same as what he's doing, Patanjali is doing here. So this sutra speaks to the enablement of understanding, how we become conscious, and how we venture from the kleshas home and the connection of the heart and how it manifests in emotion and thoughts and how we get clouded and how we get different ways that it disperses within the self and creates that confusion. That's the best way, I guess you could say it. So those are one of the ways. And how do we come to an awareness of these? These is through sadhana or practice. And that could be any of the paths that we've talked about, the mārgas. It could be through hatha yoga, which is the moving of the body. It could be through the Raja Yoga, which is the meditation piece. So that's why in this course, we give you a sampling of practice for each part, because different things will work for different people, and maybe the culmination synergy of all of them will even help in a different way beyond. And so the purpose of sadhana, or practice, is to take time to witness the surfacing of the kleshas. So when we're in a hatha practice, that we take time to notice the ways in which our mind starts to work in certain postures over others, or if we start to compare ourselves to another in those ways. It also, sadhana lets us recognize the chatter of the chitta, that those words that are kind of going on in our mind, and like I said, in coaching, when I'm coaching clients, we can call them the gremlins sometimes, these little voices that take us places that aren't really who we really are at this moment, maybe they're a part of our story, and we're trying to understand them so we can come more into the person we want to be in this moment. And the sadhana, it generates awareness of all of these distractions. And it leads us to a sense of knowing away from avidya, again, that ignorance. And it is the only way. It is the only way towards a state of yogin, union, or yoga. Those two words got mixed together. It's the only way to get there, is to practice. So in this next part, these are some of the other obstacles. These are called vrittis, or mental functions. And you don't need to know all of them, but I thought that I would show them to you. So as you can look at the wheel, there is pramana, and it doesn't have the letters on there, but that middle A, I would have a line over it so it would be held out longer. And this is known as logical proof or correct understanding. So again, we're thinking about how the mind moves and tries to make knowledge, but sometimes takes us away from the depths of the truth. So sometimes logic gets in the way. The other one after that is viparya, or erroneous cognition. So when we miscomprehend something, like an assumption or an expectation. Then there's vikalpa, which is our imagination or mental construct. So it's a fabrication in the mind, which could be helpful, and it could also be a distraction. And then you can see nidra. Again, the a at the end would have a line over it, nidra. You may have heard of classes like this. It translates literally as sleep, but really it's the process of distancing so the mind does not register experiences. And that's a mental function. And then finally, smriti, and that which is remembered. And that has an important role in the journey. Understanding all of these have a very important role as we move into our practices towards that goal of samadhi. These can become obstacles. Any one of these can become obstacles. So I want you to sit for a moment with that and think about that. How does logic get in the way? How does miscomprehension get in the way? Maybe fabrications in the mind, how do they stop the attainment of knowledge? Or memories. So these are all things that create obstacles in the mind. So one thing you could do right now is, again, you could pause the video and you could pick one particular feeling, thought, or phrase you tend to repeat. And think about how it influences your day. So if you're at the beginning of your day, you could use it as a practice throughout your day. Or if you're at the end of the day, you could save it for tomorrow. And then once you've kind of observed that and seen that, you could think about, what's the long-term impact if I continually live in imagination? What's the long-term impact if I continually miscomprehend situations? So that's just a little extra practice that you can do, and you could even do it right now, do a little writing on it, pause the video and do some writing on it, or do it later. And then there's this other three things, these three things right here that you see. Sattva, rajas, and tamas. The three of them collectively are known as guna. Each one is a guna. And gunas also influence us along our journey to self-realization. Each of them has a way in which they impact upon our state of being. So tamas is an act of being withdrawn or inactivity, where we don't engage on any level. Rajas is an over-engagement or overactivity, and this is reflected in that kind of moving about at a pretty continuous pace. And then sattva is a sense of balance between the two, and there are many different thoughts on this as far as what's right, what's not right. And the thing you have to remember with almost all of these teaching is that there isn't a right or wrong. There is a sense of understanding also when they do surface, you know what is happening and you can work with it. There are times when activity is required. And there are times when rest is required. And there's other times where being in balance would serve us much better. So these are always at play, and they're just another thing to have kind of a general awareness of how you're feeling or interacting with the world. And then lastly is abhyasa, or continuous endeavor. So sadhana that we talked about before is taking the time to witness. Abhyasa is effort and continuous endeavor. So this is like, if there's anything I've learned through my 30 plus years of studying yoga, is that it is a continuous endeavor. And anytime I should take a break, there can be a loss of remembering or understanding, or internal shifting of self. So to have some kind of continuous effort, it really is the best way to continue to move forward towards that yogic engagement. So that's today, and you can join me if you wish in doing our final closing out of this session. So again, taking the gaze that's comfortable for you in the seat that you are, putting your pens and papers aside, taking a few breaths in and out. See you in the next session.